Hi, I'm Alexander Haberbush, Executive Director and a Constitutional Attorney here at the Lex Rex Institute. If you've been following the news at all over the last several weeks, you'll know that the trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer charged with causing the unlawful death of George Floyd last May, has just concluded, and a guilty verdict has been returned on the charges of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. But really, you probably didn't even need to be following the news to know this. Odds are extremely good that as someone capable of using the internet, you've been aware of almost every development in this case without having to pay any special attention to any of it. Odds are also good that you probably had an opinion on this case from the very beginning, or at least that you were surrounded by people who did. Chauvin's case, and many others like it, seem to divide American society in two. On the one hand, many of those who consider themselves liberals or leftist immediately saw this as one more in a long string of abuses by police against black Americans. They think cops like Chauvin act on barely concealed racist bias and routinely abuse their authority to maintain a status quo that favors the wealthy, the well-connected, and especially the white. On the other hand, most conservatives saw George Floyd as a dangerous criminal, and they were quick to defend Chauvin as having acted responsibly in the course of upholding the law. They saw the outcry against him as a case of crying wolf and accused the other side of seeing racism around every corner and wanting to stop the police from doing their jobs. If you're waiting to see which side we take on this, you're watching the wrong video. Instead, we'll be talking about a very serious issue of procedural justice, the politicization of the legal process. Something else you've probably heard if you follow the news is that Maxine Waters, a Democratic congresswoman from California, was on the scene in Minnesota to stand with the protesters during the trial. When interviewed, she said that if Chauvin was found not guilty, protesters would need to, quote, stay on the streets and get more confrontational. In response to this comment, Chauvin's counsel called for a mistrial, on the grounds that the jury may have felt pressured to reach a guilty verdict in order to prevent unrest, or even just to fall in line with expectation. The judge denied the motion, but his comments on this are worth mentioning. He said, Congresswoman Waters may have given you something on appeal that may result in this whole trial being overturned, but I don't think it has prejudiced us with additional material that would prejudice the jury. They have been told not to watch the news. I trust they are following those instructions. In other words, the judge implicitly said that he does not think the outcome of the trial was determined by public remarks, but that it very easily could have been. This should be seen as a major problem, regardless of whether you believe Chauvin's guilty or not. If you believe he's not guilty, there are serious grounds for believing the trial was unfair due to external pressure on jurors. And it wasn't just Waters who made public remarks. The White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, commented that President Biden, quote, will be watching closely. The president himself told the press, I'm praying the verdict is the right verdict, which is overwhelming in my view. As if to excuse this, he then added that he would not say these sorts of things unless the jury were sequestered, but his views on the case were obvious far before this point. On the flip side, if you believe that Chauvin is guilty, you should be furious with Waters for handing the defense a golden opportunity to win on appeal and completely overturn the case. But here's the more important point. It isn't just high-profile comments that should worry us, especially in this era of mass communication and 24-hour news on demand. Jurors are not superhuman. They are subject to the same kinds of social pressures we all are, and it's incredibly easy to be swept up in a wave of public outcry and become convinced of something on sketchy evidence, or become convinced to deny something despite very good evidence. What should really worry you is that you, yourself, can easily be a part of the problem. Every social media post, every loud conversation in public, every petition you sign and share in response to a court case can contribute to an unfair trial. There are two reasons why this is a particularly big issue right here and now. First, it's never been as easy as it is right now to make people aware of what public opinion is. Thanks to the way that social media works and the way that news is reported, social media has become news in and of itself like never before. Think about how often Donald Trump's tweets made headlines, for one thing. And how often have you seen cable news or digital newspapers reporting on social media reactions to news as though those reactions were the news themselves? Ordinary people have a greater capacity than they've ever had to shape public opinion. Whether for good or ill, that's a huge responsibility incumbent on all of us. Second, there has probably never been an era of American history where political partisanship has played as big a role in shaping opinion as it does right now. Think back again to the days right after George Floyd died. How many people surprised you with their opinions? How many people had their minds changed by any of the new information that came out after the fact? My guess is a very low number. We're at a point in our culture where every event is made to fit a preconceived pattern. In the case of Chauvin and Floyd, it's either yet another killer cop believing he can do whatever he wants to a black man, or it's the liberal media and misguided activists pushing an agenda that means cops aren't allowed to do their jobs and ordinary citizens are made less safe. But everyone, regardless of how clear-cut a case may seem, deserves a fair trial. And a fair trial can't be one that is predetermined by the fact that a jury has had its mind made up before hearing out the defense. But when everyone is expected to think one way or another based on their politics, and when you can hardly avoid hearing a message that's drilled into your head all day, every day, how can a jury avoid being biased ahead of time? And if a jury can't avoid being biased, how can justice be served? The fact is, a republic governed by law cannot survive forever if its citizens do not strive to uphold their end of the bargain. It simply isn't possible for the courts themselves to guarantee that the legal system works rightly, still less for the politicians. It's up to us to do it, and that means that we need to consider what we're doing when we weigh in on current events. The law cannot be subject to the loudest public voice. If it is, it ceases to be the law at all. It becomes politics, and that's the end of justice. We are not simply bystanders. We are responsible citizens. We need to act like it.